That large storm sweeping across the country, 10 reported tornadoes, nearly 2 feet of snow in some areas, and wind gusts topping 80 miles an hour.
Overnight, a massive storm system rattling more than 30 million people.
Tornado forming. Wow.
Tornadoes breaking out in the Midwest.
Tornado warning.
Tornado on the ground.
10 twisters reported in Iowa alone.
Wow, look at that thing.
One of them ripping through this farm. Sheet metal sent flying, landing on top of trees, flipping vehicles, big and small, one after another, and unleashing a string of lightning bolts. The storm stretching further east, here in Illinois, toppled electric poles spewing balls of fire. And down south, watch as high winds up to 70 miles per hour cause these power lines to clash, instantly bursting into flames. 3-mile-long walls of fire stampeding across Oklahoma, prompting urgent evacuations in at least 7 towns, engulfing homes like this one.
Y después de Bailey das una vuelta así. Vamos al puente, ¿no?
Farmland in South Africa, cracked and barren, shows just part of the extent of the recent drought that's crippling southern regions of the continent this year. The intense El Nino, coupled with rising climate change, are putting farmers like Talon Saleh at risk. He's been forced to sell off some of his cattle to ensure the survival of the remaining herd.
We have no choice. It's just to limit our number of the cattle we have in the farm. So by doing that, we have to what? Sell and maintain a certain number that we can handle. Besides, other than that, cattle are just going to be dying all over the place.
Crop farmers are also at risk. Land is usually tilled during the region's rainy season from October to December. So far, there's been no rain in the forecast, so that window for planting crops is closing fast. Francois Engelbrecht is with the Council for Science and Industrial Research in South Africa and says 2015 is the warmest year ever recorded by humans in about 150 years of taking measurements.
9 of the 10 warmest years ever recorded have been recorded over the last 10 years. Now, this is part of global warming and the systematic warming of the planet as a result of the enhanced greenhouse effect.
The United Nations World Food Program estimates close to 27 million people in the region could go hungry if the drought persists. The World Bank has said some 100 million people worldwide could be poverty-stricken if climate change continues to affect weather patterns.
Scientists say astronomers have discovered what appears to be a miniature planet. It is the most distant body ever found in the solar system. According to Scott Shepard, an astronomer with the Carnegie Institution for Science in Washington, D.C., the object cannot be classified yet as they don't know its orbit. Based on its reflectivity, experts believe the icy body is between 500 to 1,000 kilometers in diameter, roughly half the size of Pluto. It is almost 10 billion miles from Earth, or 3 times farther away than Pluto. Shepard said it will take a year of observations to determine if this newly discovered planet travels into Pluto's neighborhood, which is a region beyond Neptune known as the Kuiper Belt.
This is quite interesting. For those who are too young to catch some of the pop stars of before, such as Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson, you don't have to worry because, thank you, new technology, they are all springing back to life and performing for a new generation of fans. Mei Lee takes us there.
When rap star Tupac Shakur, who died in 1996, came back from the dead and performed at the Coachella Music Festival, the world was in awe. The lifelike hologram of Tupac performed seamlessly with other live artists on stage. Some fans loved it. Others called it downright creepy. Alki David, CEO of Anaconda Media Group that owns Hologram USA, the company that resurrected Tupac, and many others, relishes controversy. Case in point, an upcoming project that will bring Whitney Houston back to life and on tour in 2016.
Without a doubt, it's generated a lot of interest and controversy, which we embrace. We know that we are going to put on a great show, and that's what it's down to. It's down to putting on great entertainment.
By the way, that's David's hologram I'm interviewing at Hologram USA studios in Beverly Hills.
Hello, May.
Whoa! It is as if we are standing next to each other on the stage. I am physically on the stage, but this is a projection of you next to me.
I can be in multiple locations doing exactly what I'm doing.
Hologram USA can project just about anyone, anywhere, for any reason. Perfect example, Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder living in asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He appeared as a very vocal hologram at a conference in Nantucket last year.
I'm very off about the interference in my family relationships and so on, and the hypocrisy.
Holographic technology's potential is enormous in business, politics, and entertainment. But is it profitable? Hologram USA says yes for them and for performers.
When we bring Whitney back, or when we bring Billie Holiday back, there's a lot of interest from sponsors and advertisers because essentially these artists are now alive and able to do product endorsements and personal appearances.
And when it comes to personal appearances, well, let's just say just about anyone can do it via hologram.
A minister out of Clearwater, Florida, wanted us to digitally resurrect Jesus, to have him walk on water for an Easter sermon next year.
Now that really would be something to see to believe.
This morning, the Federal Aviation Administration is looking into a series of new laser strikes on aircraft. Some of last night's attacks were caught on video. 3 local news helicopters in New York and New Jersey reported lasers were flashed at them. Chris Van Cleve is in Washington with the all-too-familiar details. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. This is the type of laser pointer behind the record surge on aircrafts this year. Now, so far, the FAA has received more than 5,300 reports so far. That's far more than last year, and they're coming in at a rate of more than 18 a day. The FAA says Wednesday was a busy night nationwide.
3 news helicopters were targeted today, including our own Chopper 2.
The crew aboard Chopper 4 became the target of a laser strike today.
Laser attack targeting our WABC newscopter tonight.
3 local TV news helicopters became the story over New York and New Jersey last night. All report being struck by dangerously bright green lasers.
They just did it again.
The attacks were caught on camera by 2 of the crews. Pilot and reporter Joe Bierman from our New York station WCBS says the lasers hit his cockpit several times.
When we were looking there, we got lasered. Same time, NYPD was right next to us.
The news crews guided police to the location of the lasers. 2 suspects were taken into custody.
Unauthorized laser illumination event 10 miles southeast of Dallas Love Airport, a 4,000 feet, a green laser.
Just after 7:30 last night, air traffic controllers in Dallas warned pilots after 3 different planes, a Southwest Airlines Boeing 737, a Virgin America Airbus A319, and a private business jet were all hit by a laser while preparing to land at Love Field.
And you want to turn away from that light source, except when it illuminates this helicopter, you can't turn away from the light source. It's incapacitating for a few moments.
Police pilot Kevin Cook patrols the skies over Los Angeles, a particular hotbed for laser strikes. It's become such a problem, all 88 airborne LAPD officers have been issued special protective glasses.
Well, Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders have condemned a deadly raid by Israeli forces at a hospital in Hebron Al-Khalil in the occupied West Bank. This after the Israeli undercover forces stormed the hospital and killed Abdullah Shalalda, kidnapping his patient cousin Azam Izzat Shalalda. Amnesty has called the attack, quote, an extrajudicial killing. The MSF has also urged Israeli military authorities to respect the special status that international humanitarian law grants to medical facilities and patients. The organisation says that Azam Izzat was one of its patients who was shot by an Israeli settler last month. The MSF also voiced its deep concern about the fate of the kidnapped patient.
Shiloh Winery says its wine is made in Israel. But according to the European Union, it's not Israel, but a settlement in occupied territory. As a result, it says any bottles bound for Europe must carry the word settlement on the label. Winemaker Amichai Luria says the EU is unfairly targeting Israel.
If you label what you call settlements, eventually, a year, 2 years from now, you'll be labeling everything that comes from Israel.
The ruling will affect not only wine, but other products commonly found on supermarket shelves, such as honey and olive oil. Israeli Foreign Minister's spokesman, Emmanuel Nachshon, says the decision smacks of boycott.
Under the guise of a bureaucratic decision, what we see here is a political attempt to change the reality on the ground.
The EU does not recognize Israel's occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. It says the label ruling aims to distinguish between goods made inside internationally accepted borders and denies suggestions of a boycott. But for business owners in the affected areas, the ruling could have serious consequences. They say if exports to Europe plunge as a result, it'll be the local Palestinian workforce that suffers the most.
Cookie Elbaz exports 500 tons of medjool dates a year. 70% used to go to Europe. That number dropped to 30% after his business was added to a boycott list. Cookie's date plantation is in land that was taken from Jordan by Israel during a 1967 war. The EU does not recognize Israel's sovereignty over that land, a stance reflected in the newly adopted labeling policy that calls for sanctions against member states who don't label Israeli quote-unquote settlement products.
If they think there is an occupation, give me the documents, show me where am I occupying. We're talking about marking products. Someone that sits somewhere in Europe says he knows better than me or even the Palestinians where the border is.
Cookie's date plantation is mere meters from the post-1967 Jordan-Israel border seen here. Nearby, Ali, a Palestinian farmer, pays Jewish settlers to farm the land. He thinks labeling could be a good thing.
It seems that the Israelis don't want peace, and the Arabs don't know what the Israelis are going to do, and nobody is helping the Arabs.
EU leaders say labeling could apply the pressure Israel needs to restart negotiations with the Palestinians over the disputed land. Israel's leaders disagree.
Israel's government says this decision smacks of discrimination and that those who it will hurt the most are the Palestinians.
All of Cookie's employees are Palestinian. If labeling hurts profits, he'll lay people off. It's a double-edged sword both EU and Palestinian leaders feel is worth the potential fallout.
Tel Aviv has strongly condemned the European Union's backing of the labeling of products made in Israeli settlements. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has called the EU's move a discriminatory step taken for political reasons. It accused the bloc of being inspired by the international movement of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The ministry said the EU has taken this step at the time when Israel is confronting what it called a wave of terrorism by Palestinians. Israel has summoned the EU envoy to protest the move. It came after the European Commission said it backs labeling products from territories occupied by Israel. The measures will primarily cover fruit and vegetables from the area.
The idea is basically, from what we understand, is that, first of all, it's less than 1% of the export from Israel to the European Union comes from those places. But I think that the symbolism of it, I think, is crazy. I think it's a double standard that the European Union, first of all, has never regulated something that's less than 1% of the turnover of trade. So, and I think that ultimately it's going to be hurting the Palestinians, who are the employees in most of the Jewish businesses and factories in Judea and Samaria and Gaza and other places. I think it's politicians without farsightedness making a very stupid decision that maybe one day they'll have brains and realize that they made a big mistake.
Do you think that something like this, labeling products that come maybe from a specific area in Israel, but from Israel, from the Jews, can even somewhat promote anti-Semitism?
Definitely. I mean, that's not only I think so, but the dissenting voices within the European Commission also felt that it's going to bring and it could add anti-Semitism. Let me tell you, I mean, things that are made in Israel say to them that they're made in Israel. The issue is not, and there's a lot of things that are sold that are made in Israel. So the actual labeling of stuff made in Israel is not going to be a problem. I think the fact that it's pointing out that it's made in the West Bank, and I think they have to put parentheses occupied or something by Israel, I think that's a very, very stupid thing.
The labeling of products of the Jewish state by the European Union brings back dark memories. Europe should be ashamed of itself. It took an immoral decision. Of the hundreds of territorial conflicts around the world, it chose to single out Israel and Israel alone, while it's fighting its back against the wall, against a wave of terror. The European Union is not going to hurt the Israeli economy. It's strong enough to weather this. But it's the Palestinian workers in Israeli enterprises in Judea and Samaria that will be hurt. This will not advance peace. It will certainly not advance truth and justice. It's wrong. Europe should be ashamed of itself.
On boycotts, we're against boycotts. On settlements, we're against settlements. But, and my last point is the but, that Israel should, that it shouldn't be a surprise to Israel that some of the international community pursue steps to limit commercial relations with the settlements. It's not a boycott per se, but could be taken as a boycott since it identifies.
So you oppose it?
We oppose boycotts.
No, but I'm asking about the labeling.
We oppose any, I would say, any action that could be taken. Again, action has not been taken yet, but we oppose any boycott against Israel. I just said that very clearly. We consider boycotts to be.
I know that's boycotts.
Yes,
Do you consider the labeling to be a boycott?
I would say that.
Or if it's a step on the way to a boycott, would you?
It could be perceived as a step on the way.
So do you oppose it?
Israel is pushing the United States to recognize the Golan Heights, which it annexed in 1981 as Israeli territory. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly raised the issue in his Monday meeting with the U.S. President Barack Obama in Washington. Netanyahu said that the U.S. should change its view of the Golan Heights in light of the war in Syria. Obama reportedly did not answer to Netanyahu's plea. Back in July, Netanyahu's former cabinet secretary had also said that the Syrian crisis was a historic opportunity for Tel Aviv to seek international recognition of its annexation of the Golan. Israel occupied the strategically important Syrian territory in 1967. It has built dozens of illegal settlements there. Israel has also used the area to support terrorists involved in the Syrian war, including giving them medical care.
I also will discuss with the Prime Minister his thoughts on how we can lower the temperature between Israeli and Palestinians, how we can get back on a path towards peace, and how we can make sure that legitimate Palestinian aspirations are met through a political process, even as we make sure that Israel is able to secure itself.
I want to make it clear that we have not given up our hope for peace. We'll never give up our hope for peace. And I remain committed to a vision of peace, of two states for two peoples, a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state. I don't think that anyone should doubt Israel's determination to defend itself against terror and destruction, but neither should anyone doubt Israel's willingness to make peace with any of its neighbors that genuinely want to achieve peace with them.
The so-called two-state solution in the Middle East is not an impossible dream, but requires courage, Secretary of State John Kerry said Wednesday. The comments by Kerry were made to an Israeli gathering at the United Nations, where there was a commemoration of the 1975 speech delivered by then-Israeli Ambassador Chaim Herzog denouncing a UN resolution that declared Zionism a form of racism. The Zionist dream embraces the concept of Israel as a Jewish democracy, a beacon of light to all nations, Kerry told the event. That dream can only be upheld by two states living side by side in security, he declared, adding, "We all know from years of discussion and efforts, this is not an impossible dream. It is achievable." Kerry argued that choosing to recognize a Palestinian state demands courage, demands leadership, and likened that choice to Herzog's actions at the UN 40 years ago.
that State of Israel is illegitimate and believes in a one-state solution, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani declared Wednesday. In an interview on France 2 television ahead of his upcoming visit to Paris, Rouhani said that the current state of Israel is not legitimate. Earlier this year, Rouhani claimed that Israel creates the greatest danger in the region, after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu detailed how Iranian aggression is wreaking havoc in the Middle East. The people of the world are content with the way negotiations with the P5+1 group are moving forward, but there is only this occupying regime that is enraged by these talks, Rouhani claimed in reference to Israel. Shortly after being elected in 2013, Rouhani called Israel an old wound that should be removed, though Iranian media later claimed that Rouhani's remarks were distorted.
I've left the internal battle in Syria untouched because I'm not sure what to choose, and you have to openly admit it. But here's what I do define in Syria. I don't want Syria to be used as a launching ground for attacks against us. And I have said this to Vladimir Putin when I flew to Moscow to see him. I went to see him first to make sure that our planes don't crash at each other. It's not a good idea. But I told him, here's what we do in Syria. We will not allow Iran to set up a second front in the Golan, and we will act forcefully and have acted forcefully to prevent that. We will not allow the use of Syrian territory from which we'd be attacked by the Syrian army or anyone else. And we have acted forcefully against that. And third, we will not allow the use of Syrian territory for the transfer of game-changing weapons into Lebanon, into Hezbollah's hands. And we have acted forcefully on that.
Syrian media say that Israeli warplanes have attacked several targets near the country's capital, Damascus. The targeted areas are said to be close to Damascus International Airport. No reports of possible casualties. Syrian officials have not reacted to the news yet. Over the past 4 years, Israeli warplanes have carried out a number of military operations inside of Syria. Tel Aviv is accused of supporting anti-Damascus terrorists in the crisis-hit Arab country.
Islamic State has released a video threatening attacks in Russia in revenge for Russian airstrikes in Syria. In the nearly 5-minute-long video, chants in Russian threatening blood spill very soon can be heard. The Kremlin said Russian state security services would study the material. Islamic State has previously called for attacks on Russia and the U.S. in revenge for airstrikes on its fighters in Syria. Western intelligence officials suspect the ultra-hardline Sunni group of planting a bomb on a Russian passenger plane. The plane crashed in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula on October 31st, killing all 224 passengers and crew. The plane was taking Russian tourists back home from the Sharm el-Sheikh tourist resort. Islamic State militants fighting Egyptian security forces in Sinai said they brought it down.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Monday that the Syria mission shows the combat readiness and capability of Russian armed forces have grown. Putin made the comments while chairing a meeting in Sochi on the development of the country's defense industry.
The enterprises are working at a good pace. The armed forces are getting a new strategic missile systems, nuclear and multi-role submarines, and surface ships. We renewed the combat aircraft fleet and air defense missile troops, and the weapons and equipment of the ground and airborne forces. These well-timed measures have increased the combat readiness, the combat capability of our armed forces, and the anti-terrorist operation that we're carrying out on the request of the Syrian leadership.
Design plans for a Russian nuclear torpedo have been accidentally broadcast on 2 Kremlin-controlled television stations during ordinary news bulletins. During a piece covering a meeting between President Vladimir Putin and his military high command, the camera cut away to a general staring at plans of the torpedo system. The document appeared on screen for several seconds. It shows drawings and descriptions of a weapon labeled Ocean Multipurpose System Status 6, a large self-propelled torpedo carrying an exceptionally powerful nuclear warhead. The document has been edited out.
Does the U.S. fight against the Islamic State need more boots on the ground? More and more U.S. senior officials are veering toward yes. U.S. Air Chief Secretary Deborah Lee James said on Tuesday U.S. strikes against the extremist group will not be enough without local boots on the ground. Her comments echoed Pentagon Chief Ashton Carter's remarks 2 days earlier. Carter said more U.S. troops could absolutely be deployed to Syria if Washington can find more partners among local forces. U.S. President Barack Obama had authorized the first sustained deployment of fewer than 50 special force personnel to Syria. The move was seen by Damascus as an aggression, and it reversed a long-standing refusal to put U.S. boots on the ground.
Well, Russia's accused the United States of double-dealing in its so-called fight against ISIL in Syria. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson said Moscow cannot ignore the fact that ISIL's actions were treated with some degree of favour in Washington for a long time. Maria Zakharova said the US speaks about global stability while expecting the overthrow of the legitimate government in Syria by the terrorist group. Remarks came ahead of the next round of talks over the Syrian crisis. Moscow accused Washington of attempting to divide participants in Saturday's meeting into, quote, those who are leading and those who are being led.
First general strike in Greece in many months, and this time the protesters are on the other side of the fence to left-wing politicians. The industrial action and the clashes that came with it are the biggest domestic challenge yet to Alexis Tsipras' government. Elected on a promise to ease up on austerity, he ended up having to accept a third bailout with very unpopular terms to keep Greece in the euro.
We Greek pensioners can't afford to live. Enough of cuts to our pensions and wages. The Greek people must rise up.
The measures that the government wants to pass will bury us.
The strike brought transport to a standstill, schools were closed and hospitals took emergency cases only. It was all reminiscent of times gone by, a period many hoped was now over. Jane Foley is from Rabobank.
The strike that we're having today is still very suggestive of the difficulties of implementing austerity in Greece. Even if this bailout does go through, there are still going to be problems further down the line, and that's even before there's been a new set of discussions about cuts to the level of its debt.
There are also signs of a new disagreement between Athens and its lenders. The government isn't keen on a tougher approach to those homeowners who are late with mortgage payments. There's a lot at stake, not least the release of a €2 billion tranche of bailout money. Without it, Greece can't pay off state arrears or give its main banks the €10 billion they desperately need.
Well, students across the United States have held rallies on college campuses to protest against tuition fees and student debt. The demonstrations, dubbed the Million Students March, were planned at more than 100 colleges and universities. The movement's organisers said in a statement that education should be free, demanding a cancellation of all student debt and a $15 an hour minimum wage for campus workers. The rallies come as the US Consumer Financial Protection Bureau said the total volume of student loan debt is about $1.2 trillion. The Bureau said most students find it hard to keep up with the repayments.
In the U.S., student protests against racism are spreading beyond the University of Missouri, whose president resigned last Monday.
We cannot demand that everyone participate, but we hope you will show solidarity with us, with lying on this ground, chanting with us, and simply being with us in this space. The dying will now commence. No Congress! No Congress! No Congress!
Now, students at Ithaca College in New York and Smith College in Massachusetts also walked out their classes. They're complaining about what they call rampant racial injustice and are demanding changes in campus leadership. Students at over 20 other universities also planned protests in solidarity. President of the University of Missouri, Tim Wolf, stepped down amid protests over his handling of racial complaints.
Hundreds of Lufthansa flights are canceled Saturday after a cabin crew union started a series of walkouts Friday that could become the longest ever strike at the carrier. The walkout comes after Lufthansa and the union failed to reach an agreement on early retirement benefits and pensions. Passengers are frustrated.
I can only understand this a little bit because it is blackmail. A small group wants to make their mark and 100,000 have to come and kiss their hands. This is blackmail. And normally in Europe we try to find a compromise through talks and negotiations, but if one side is not ready to do so and reaches for the strongest weapon, then this is a pathetic display for both sides.
The spokesperson for the Cabin Crew Workers Union, UFO, Nikolai Babli, says talking has not been enough.
After 2 years of negotiation, it does not work anymore via talks only, so we now go on strike for the first time.
Without concessions, the union says it will carry out walkouts until November 13th. Lufthansa spokesperson Andre Barros says that will mean a lot of canceled flights.
Elsewhere, France's biggest refugee camp in the northern port of Calais has seen 3 nights of clashes between riot police and migrants seeking to cross into Great Britain. Dozens of officers have been injured and additional police have been deployed to provide security.
Okay, go back to the jungle. Go back to the jungle.
At least 43 people are killed and more than 240 wounded in Lebanon Thursday in 2 suicide bomb blasts claimed by Islamic State. The attacks took place in Beirut's southern suburbs, a stronghold of the Shiite Muslim group Hezbollah. Hospitals are coping with the aftermath. Hezbollah has sent hundreds of fighters to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces in the 4-year-old conflict over the border. Syria's civil war is increasingly playing out as a proxy battle between regional rivals. Anyone can be a target.
I was at home when the first explosion happened. I walked down to see what happened and check on my son who was on the street. I arrived and found people shouting. We started running away when they said it was an explosion. Then the second explosion happened while we were running. I did not know anything more.
Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack in a statement posted online. Hezbollah vowed to continue its fight against IS, warning of a, quote, long war against its enemies.
Today we come here for, we need the peace because of our people.
Italy says 17 people have been arrested across Europe in a joint operation against suspected members of a terrorist group. Rome's chief prosecutor says among those arrested were 6 suspects in Italy, 4 in Britain and 3 in Norway. The network, which was also operating in Finland and Germany, had been allegedly planning to try to free their leader out of detention in Norway. Italian police say several members of the group have traveled to Iraq and Syria to fight for Daesh. The network's Iraqi-born leader was accused of financing an Iraqi militant group called Ansar al-Islam. It reportedly merged with Daesh last year. Investigators said the network was about to continue sending more militants abroad and to carry out attacks in Europe.